Coming back in part 4 of our review session here, going over what's going to be on the test. We got up to Sapir-Whorf Hypothesis. Remember, Sapir-Whorf Hypothesis has to do with the uh, linguistic relativity principle, the idea that language and perception are closely related, that language influences perception. The colors you see even are connected to the words you have to describe those colors. Speech variety. We like to talk about speech variety instead of language, dialect, accent, etc. Just think of it as a speech variety. It's easier than trying to get all political and say, oh, you're not speaking a real different language because you don't have an army and a navy for your language. You just talk funny. So it's just a dialect. I mean, there are ways of distinguishing these, but we're not doing them here. We just like to talk about speech variety. Language diversity more generally, different ways of speaking, different registers, different accents, and the way those are judged. Um, Marked speech varieties. Basically, um, marked means you stick out. Unmarked means you don't stick out. So if you think of, do I speak with an accent? You're not asking a question about yourself. Of course, everyone has their own way of speaking that's connected to how they were raised. The question is my way of speaking marked? Do I sound like I'm from here, or do I sound like I'm from somewhere else? So the question is not about you and the way you talk. The question is about where you live and what is normal for the people around you. So if it is if you speak in a way that's markedly different, then you're speaking a marked speech variety. Markedness more generally, of course, this is true about race, ethnicity, and identity, and gender expression, and all the rest, right? It all just has to do with marked versus unmarked. Um, Metaphors. We talked a little bit about metaphors, gendered speech, a little bit about tone, code switching. Remember the video with the little boy who could speak 3 different languages and just switch from them effortlessly. Language register. Think about the uh, sorry that marked piece. Sorry, that's important. The marked versus unmarked. That's an important point. Just wanted to reinforce that. Let's see, language register. This is like choosing a different box of words, choosing from the non-vulgar box versus the extremely vulgar box, right? You remember that? We call that a register. Digital language, language change. Lingua franca means a language that is spoken, understood by people, even though it's not their original language. A pidgin is a language of reduced complexity that's used within a certain context, a work environment, or something like that. A Creole is when 2 languages come together. Creole, English is a Creole of French and German. Um, and then language extinction when language changes such that it doesn't exist anymore. Okay, on to Muckle 10, economics. Um, this was kind of a very long one. I departed from the text a lot, so a lot of this is going to be based on your watching those videos and following along. So the global economic system has its roots, believe it or not, in the Roman manorial system. We go all the way back to about 2,000 years. Um, so that Roman manorial system, remember, with the general who gets a manor house in Spain. So the Roman Empire in previous years, decades maybe, had conquered land in Spain, and so by the time uh, Russell Crowe comes along in the Gladiator movie, he maybe was born anywhere in the Mediterranean basin, but probably in Central Asia. But then he was raised as a soldier in the academies, and then he graduates, and then he has 20 years of service, um, and promoted based on his ability, and becomes a general. And then that's awarded. That's his award. Is the manor. So this Roman manorial system turns into European feudal society with the collapse of the Pax Romana, with the Roman army disappearing. So we have European feudal society. with the knights, who are younger sons who don't inherit um, the land. They have to go make their way in the world, whether through violence or through commerce or through the church. So there's basically three kinds of people in the society. There are freeholders who have their own control over the land. All the land belongs to the king in most of these countries in title. But in effect, who can make decisions about how the land is used, that's the freeholder's decision. Usually the freeholder is some kind of nobility or aristocracy, all the way down to just an important member of the village who has this freeholding right over his 100 acres. If you're not that, then you're a peasant. You have no say in how the land is used. All you have is a claim to the fruit of the land. So it's going to be done, all the labor to the land is going to be done by hand. And I, as a peasant, have a right for it to be the handwork of my family. And in return, we get to keep a portion of it to keep ourselves alive. So they have that right. It's like being able to live in a house rent free so long as you keep it up, right? It's some kind of squatter's rights that is generational. The last one there is cotter, and these are people who have no right to the land at all. All they have is their labor. When they are born, they have 70 years of labor. And if they gain education, that labor becomes more valuable. And when they die, whatever they have left over goes on to their kids in terms of cash. Okay, and so that is basically where laborers are in our world today. Now that we are broken free from the land, most of us, my ancestors as well, were peasants of some sort in Europe or somewhere else on the planet. Pretty much a lot of these places, there are very few freeholders outside of tribal or hunter-gatherer type societies. Once you have private property, then things tend to belong to the state in many places. In any case, so that's what that's there for. Mercantilist roots of capitalism, looking at the 1492, remember the most important date, Samarkand in Central Asia, most important city, Tamerlane, who built it and built all those universities there. In contrast, Spain and Portugal were descending toward madness. There was genocide. There was total collapse of the society, ethnic cleansing going on, just complete and utter violence and ridiculous, over the top sort of stupidity. But they also discovered the New World, discovered the Americas, and so were able to fund then this genocidal stretch across the Americas, reaping a lot of silver and then bringing it back to Europe, where it gets spread around not just in Spain and Portugal, but in other parts of the world, other parts of Europe. Sorry. Actually, it does go to other parts of the world. If you look at the Taj Mahal in India, all of these beautiful, expensive buildings built in the 1600s, mainly with Spanish gold, because the Spanish silver, because they were spending that money in the East, buying stuff and trading a lot of silk and fineries from China, etc. And a lot of it ended up in the hands of the Indian merchants in the 16th and 17th centuries. In any case, sorry, digression. Let's see. Death, war, and inflation. Remember the cycle of inflation. Let's see. Colonialism, neocolonialism, how those things worked. Extraction. Remember extractive economies. We're coming to that in a little bit, but for sure, most of the Europe conquers the entire world between 1492 and 19 I don't know 18 or so, and a lot of the time the way the economies they set up afterwards were extractive. So they're just interested in the resources in that country and how they can come out and go to Europe to be used to make stuff to then turn around and sell back to the people later on after the 19th century rolls around. Exploration, Portuguese exploration. Remember Spain and Portugal and Latin America. We have Cortez defeating the Aztecs in Mexico, and Pizarro defeating the Incas in Peru. The conquistadors are following the same model of the Roman manorial system. We see it alive again with these haciendas and encomiendas taking place where generals, conquistadors, are awarded estates or manors, which are called haciendas, and they are given the right to the peasants, that is the slaves or the Indians living around there, and then later on they import African slaves. Results of New World conquest in Spain and Portugal is just this devastating cycle of for ordinary people. It's just repeated inflationary cycles, impoverishment, crisis, etc. Remember the family and how they have a crisis and it gets worse and it gets worse. And then the kid goes off, joins the army to explore and conquer, send back more silver, and ruin the family next door too. Let's see. That was the cycle. The results in Spain and Portugal. Africa was slavery and wars and massive depopulation. Great Britain and trade. This is where the trading system begins in the 1600s with the Dutch and then British dominance. Karl Marx is coming up with a lot of these ideas of materialist approach. Emanuel Wallerstein is he's the sociologist who comes up with world systems theory. So we have modernization theory, and that's rejected. That is unilineal. Oh, goodness, we're up to 12 minutes. So we'll come back with the modernization theory.